Hello, today we're going to learn how to play StoneAge. This is what the game looks like. There's an area for collecting food. The food comes in various sizes. There's an area for wood, brick, stone, gold. There's a village where you can get a couple of long-term improvements, and cards, which is one of the major ways you can get points. The player boards look like this. So every player starts off with 5 people, 12 food. They'll all start off without anything here, nothing there. There is a description for the value of all the resources. So food is worth 2, wood 3, up until gold that's worth 6. You have a token that determines the starting player. And then you also have some extra people. Every player has 10 total that you can add to your tribe as you play the game. So how does the game work? Basically, you allocate people to the different resource areas, and then for every person that you allocate there, you roll dice. So for all the people that you place in an area, you roll the dice and then you see what your total is going to be. Remember the valuations of all the items. So food is worth 2, right? So for every 2 in your dice total, that's the amount of food that you get. So in this case, this would be 1 food, this would be another food. So this player would be able to get 2 food total from this hunt. Had they gotten 4, they would have been able to get 3, etc. If you have an odd value out, then that value isn't going to be useful. We'll talk more about this later. If this player was to play in the wood, you do the same thing. You roll dice, and then you divide by 3, round down. So 6 divided by 3 rounded down is 2. Do note that in some situations it is possible, like if you get snake eyes, for you to get nothing. So be mindful of how many people you allocate to a resource, and to make sure that even if your luck is bad, that you do get food. So that's how you gather resources. But how do you do it better? And so there's also areas in the village where you can allocate your people so you can get more things. One of the mechanics of the game is that whenever you place all your people, you have to feed them all. Everybody starts off with 12 food, so you have enough food to feed your people for minimum 2 rounds. You can always allocate your people to the field, the wild area, to collect food. But this improvement is a farm. And so whenever you place somebody there, you're able to move your farm token upwards. And so basically, for every person that you have to feed them 1 food, but you subtract your farm amount, and then that's how much food you actually have to feed them. So if you move this up high enough, it could be possible that you pay 0 food, and then you can focus your efforts on other things. The wild area, the food area here, has an unlimited amount of people. Any number of players can go there. Every other area is limited to 7. And then depending on the number of players, so I think if it's 4 players, everybody can go in. But if you have 2 or 3 or 2 players, then even if like somebody goes here, yellow goes there, then perhaps no more people can play. It just depends on the number of players. Make sure you double check the rules on that one. What can 2 people do when they go into the hut? The hut is a way for you to get a 3rd person. So, you can use different nicknames for the hut. We call it the love hut. That's what you do in that location. What about over here? What do these numbers mean? Whenever you place a worker there, you get a tool. And so when you first gather a tool, you get a 1. And if you were to continue going there, then you add your tools until you fill this up. And then if you were to place even more people there, then you will be able to flip the numbers over until you get 2, 2, 2. And then here are 3, 3, 3s. And then if you flip on the back, you get 4. What do the tools do? Remember that we send our people out to the field to go collect resources. So let's pretend it's brick. So we roll 3 dice for the brick. So brick is a resource that needs 4. So in this case, this would be one brick, this would be a second brick, but this isn't anything. But with the tools, once per turn, we can use them so we can add this number to the dice. So instead of just bringing 2 bricks home, we can actually bring home the third. So tools are a very useful way to kind of counteract the luck, so you can guarantee your resource gathering no matter what numbers you get. So we talked about the number of players. So if you have 4 players, people can fill these spots all the time. But if you have 3 or 2 players, then as soon as 2 of these locations are filled up, then the third cannot be filled up. So again, just double check that you're following that limitation. So we talked about gathering resources. We talked about improvements for your ability to gather resources, either more people or more food or the tools. What do these bottom things do? Let's start with the buildings. You can place a worker on a building to claim it. These buildings are a way for you to get resources. So this is probably the most easiest to explain. Basically, you spend 1 through 7 resources of anything but food, you add up their point totals, and then you score that many victory points. For example, 1 through 7, this is a resource symbol. So you could spend 1 wood. And remember, your card tells you what what every resource is worth in points. So if you spend 1 wood, you could convert that into 3 points. Alternatively, if you have a bunch of other resources, you could spend all of these to say, okay, 2 golds, 12, 3 bricks, another 12. So I'm going to spend these 5. Remember, 5 is the number 1 through 7 to get a total of 24 points. So this is the most flexible. Some of the other cards will dictate what exactly you have to spend, and then that will add up to the number of points that you get. So 2 bricks, 8 plus the gold, which is 6, adds up to 14. What about this one? This card means you have to spend 5 resources of exactly 2 types. So going back, you could spend 2 golds and 3 bricks. Or if you want to save your bricks for something else, you could spend 3 woods. Whatever it is, as long as you have exactly 2 different categories of resources and you spend 5 total, then you would gather those victory points. So you would return these to the bank, get that card, and then you get that in your little field area. Whenever you get a card, you flip the bottom one. This card is like the other one, except instead of having to spend exactly 2 types of resources, you have to spend 4. So it's 4 categories equaling a total of 5 resources in order to score that building. Okay, we talked about everything in the game. Now we need to talk about the cards. So one of the things you can do is place your worker on a card. Your cards have a short-term ability and a long-term ability. The short-term ability is usually straightforward. So for this one, you get 3 food. Easy. This one, you get 2 stones. Easy. What about this? Does that mean you get 3 tools? So if you have 0, you can immediately get 1, 2, 3? Not quite. Whenever you see a large number on one of these cards, that means you get 1 temporary tool that you have a one-time use, and as soon as you use it, it goes back. What's this? This is the general store. So you roll a dice for all the players in the game, and then the starting player gets to decide what they want first. So they would pick, usually the highest number, gold. Every other player would get something else. So getting this card is a way to benefit basically everybody. And then you'll notice that the higher numbers will either award a farm or a tool. And this one, unlike the other one, is a permanent tool. So normally, starting off, you'll probably want to get these higher numbers. However, near the end of the game, when the farm production is less important, you might want to opt for the resource instead. In order to gather these cards, you have to spend the number of resources listed at the top. And then as you go and buy them, so in this case, 2 woods, buy that card, you keep it, you can flip it face down, And then these remaining cards would slide over. And in that way, you kind of consistently go cycle through the cards. For now, I'll put this back just so we can explain some other mechanics later. What else can you get at the top? This one's pretty straightforward. Roll 2 dice and, it's basically pretending that you put 2 workers there. Roll 2 dice and get stone for that. For this card, you are able to add any tools that you have available. For this one, you get 3 victory points. So wherever you are, you move your player up to 3 points. This one is +1 permanent farm production. This one is get 2 resources of any kind, general store again, 5 food, etc. For this explanation, I put these all face up, but normally these would be face down so nobody can peek to see what's coming ahead. So we've talked about the top, which is a short-term benefit, but what about the bottom? So notice that you might have a number of symbols at the bottom or a number of people. The people is the easiest to explain. Basically, for every person, you get that many victory points for whatever it's multiplied by. So in this case, for every worker that you have, you get 1 point per tool level. So this could be anything anywhere from 0 through 12, depending on how many tools you have. So for this player, they would have 4 if they were able to get this card. This bottom picture is scored at the end of the game. This one would be 2 points for every building that you gathered. We'll talk about that symbol in a minute. This would be 1 point for every farm, 3 points for every building, etc. And if you have a lot of the ones that care for the building, then they all multiply and all count towards the end. What about these symbols? One of the things you'll notice in your card is that you have these symbols, and then you have the symbols 1 through 8, and then this is the square of those symbols. In other words, if you have 1 symbol, you get 1 point. If you have 2 symbols at the end of the game, then you get 2 squared, 4. If you have 3 symbols, then you get 3 squared, 9. You might be thinking, oh, great, so let's get a bunch of symbols. But then what happens if you get 2 of the same? So if you have 2 of the same, the second symbol is always going to score 1. So basically, the first round of symbols is going to be highly valuable. The second round is going to be nearly worthless. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Although it may be advantageous for you to grab it if you really dedicated in blocking somebody. We talked about what all the pieces in the game do. The only thing left to discuss is how the game ends. As people place the workers on the building tiles, they'll spend the resources, gather the building, flip a new one. These stacks have 7 buildings, and whenever one of them hits 0, then you finish that round, and that's the end of the game. You have a stack of 7 for every player playing. So if you have 2 people playing, it'd be 14, 7, 7. If you have 3 people playing, it'd be 3 stacks, 4 people playing, 4 stacks, etc. One difference is that this stack of development cards is going to be the same for everybody, no matter if you have 2 or 4 players. So people are going to be collecting these, right? These are going to be sliding over. You're going to make new ones, they slide over, etc. Whenever this deck runs out, then that will be the final round of the game. And that's about it. That basically covers all the mechanics of the game. In terms of strategy, there is some depth in what you do. Normally, early on, you'll definitely want to prioritize, farming, your people, your tool gathering. Near the end of the game, though, as you get more and more people, as your tribe grows from, 5 to, potentially even 10, then you might want to say, let's gather resources. Everybody go, gather gold or whatever. Do be careful, though, because if these resources aren't spent on buildings or some other item, at the end of the game, they're only worth 1. So normally you want to have a healthy balance of gathering wood. Since wood is the cheapest resource, you can use wood to spend on the cards. But then, at the end of the game, you do want to make sure that you're spending down all of your resources. One other thing, we talked about the food. If you ever run out of food, then one thing that you could do is that you could eat anything here. including gold, wood, etc. But do know that gold is much harder to get, stone is much harder to get. So you definitely rather spend food to feed your people. But in a pinch, you can do something else if you really need to spend that person to, go grab a card or go grab a building, etc. If you are unable to feed your people with food and you don't want to spend resources, or you can't spend resources, then you lose some points. So do keep that in mind. I think that's about it for the game. This is StoneAge. Pretty fun game. Good transition game to other things. We'll talk about the review in the next video. Thank you.